You're listening to the Healing Blueprint podcast, where we bridge traditional and holistic healing modalities. We bring you weekly conversations with industry experts, sharing insights, tools, and guidance to help you build your own healing blueprint. I'm your host, Jill Briansky. Now let's meet our guest and get healing. Hi, and welcome to the Healing Blueprint podcast. I'm Jill Briansky, your host. I'm a therapist, healer, and the founder of Purple Lotus in Massachusetts. And I want to thank you for joining me. I created this podcast to explore something I've been passionate about for over 20 years. And that's what real healing looks like. Not the quick fix version, not the trends. The real version of healing, which is layered, human. It's often messy, and it's incredibly beautiful. The kind that transforms you from the inside out. But before we start bringing on guests and diving into different healing modalities, I want to share how I got here. Because this was a journey. And honestly, it was one I didn't see coming. It all started back in the early 2000s when I was working at an internet company. It was during the tech boom, and our company was fast-paced, high pressure, and incredibly exciting. That is, until the layoffs started. When they did, everything shifted. Stress wasn't just something people were feeling individually. It permeated the walls. Everyone was bracing, waiting, wondering when would it be their turn. One day in the middle of this, a friend of mine came over and gently placed his hands on my shoulders. Within seconds, the stress melted away. My entire body filled with this deep, steady peace. It was something I had never felt before. I remember spinning around in my chair and saying, "What was that?" He smiled at me and said, "Well, that's Reiki." I had no idea what Reiki was. But I knew I wanted more of it. I wanted to understand it. I wanted to do it. I wanted to use it to help other people feel the way I just felt. And so I started learning, and I went through the different levels of Reiki, often more than once. You might say I became addicted to going through these lessons and learning more and more. Eventually, I became a Reiki master. And instead of feeling finished, I felt more curious. Something during the process created an opening inside me. It was this deep, almost insatiable desire to understand how the body and energy and healing actually worked. In my quest for more, I started researching what was out there because this was a whole new world for me. And I kept being led to one word, and that word was reflexology. I didn't know what reflexology was. I didn't know really what it did. I didn't understand how it worked. And I definitely didn't think I was a foot person. It felt random. But inside of me, I knew, I had this knowing that this was my next step. Even if I didn't know the why or what I would learn or how it would be used. And I signed up for my certification class. And during the course, something happened. I learned about the body in a way I had never learned before. I started to understand how stress shows up physically, how emotions get stored in our tissues, how the body and mind are an integrated whole and not just separate systems. At the end of the training, we had to work on 10 people 10 times and document our results. Around session 3, for most of the participants, something started to shift. When I would walk into their home, they would be filled with excitement, almost bursting at the seams, waiting to tell me what had shifted during the week, changes they had in their sleep, their mood, their relationships. And after our sessions, their processing would continue. They would share emotions that surfaced during our session, memories that they've had, and even some releases. During my program, we were taught that if someone is verbally processing, our role was simply to listen and nod. We weren't mental health professionals. We didn't have the tools to help someone through their emotions in that way. And so I did. I listened and I nodded and I witnessed. But it wasn't enough for me. Don't get me wrong, there's deep healing in being witnessed and having someone truly sit with you and see what you're feeling and support you in that way. But at the same time, sometimes witnessing is just the doorway, and we need more. We need skillful guidance, intentional space, and grounded support so that we can move all the way through what's surfacing and come to the other side feeling clearer, steadier, and more integrated. And yet again, I found myself in a situation where I knew I needed to go back to school. I knew in the depths of my being that that was my next step. I wasn't someone who loved traditional schooling, and I tried very hard to talk myself out of it. I maybe even kicked and screamed a little bit. But deep down, I knew this was something I needed to do. I won't bore you with the details. Let's say 2 years later, I graduated with my master's degree in social work. And what I learned is language for what I had already been witnessing. I learned about trauma, attachment, the nervous system, survival adaptations. I understood more clearly why people do what they do and how profound our survival systems actually are. As a graduation gift to myself, I did what many of you might consider a little strange, and I enrolled in a year-long herbal apprenticeship. And after that, just because I loved it, I did another one. That part of me that was connected to the energy work and to nature felt expansive and alive. Like there was always this another layer to uncover. And every new modality and every new thing I learned added a new piece to the puzzle. Slowly, the picture of how our systems work, mentally, physically, emotionally, and energetically, started coming together for me. And that original spark that I felt when my friend placed his hands on my shoulders just kept building. Over the years, I've worked in many settings. I've helped house the homeless. I've held the hands of people who were dying. I've supported families in deep grief. I've worked with children, elders, and everyone in between. For the past decade, I've been in private practice, focusing mostly on anxiety and trauma. And alongside the clinical work, I've continued expanding my intuitive and energy-based practices. For a while, it felt like I was living in two different worlds. Therapy on one side, energy work on the other. But eventually, I realized that these are just two different doorways into the same process. Because healing isn't just one thing. It's not something that lives in just one room or with one modality. It's not only what happens in a therapy session, and it's not only what happens on a healing table. It's not separate from the body, the mind, or the energy, but it's the conversation between all of them. When someone talks about trauma, their body responds. When someone receives healing work, emotions surface. The mind and body are always in conversation. In my practice, therapy and energy work have become integrated. There are two entry points into one healing experience. And that's what this podcast is about. Because healing isn't about fixing yourself or becoming someone new. It's about peeling back the layers that we created. It's about removing what we had to become in order to survive so that we can return to who we actually are. And you are not broken. I am not broken. We are not broken. We adapted. Anxiety is protective. People-pleasing isn't a weakness, it's survival. Shutting down isn't failure, it's your nervous system trying to conserve energy. Healing is integration. It's not perfection, and it's not a life without triggers. It's the ability to move toward the trigger, to turn toward that part of you that's in pain and say, I see you. To approach your reactions with curiosity instead of judgment. Because our triggers aren't proof that we're broken. They're just signals. They're invitations. They're parts of us that are asking to be seen and brought back into balance. We live in a time that is very out of balance. Burnout is normalized. Anxiety is everywhere. And sadly, disconnection is very common. And there's so much noise. Each week, we'll try to take you out of the noise. I'm going to be sitting down with therapists, with physicians, energy practitioners, intuitives, and spiritual guides. We'll explore the intersections between traditional and holistic healing. We'll talk about trauma, the nervous system, grief, boundaries, spiritual awakening, all of it. Some of these conversations will challenge you. Some may validate you. And others might gently shift something that's been stuck inside you. Because healing is layered, personal, and integrated. You don't have to choose between clinical wisdom and intuitive insight. You don't have to pick mind or body or spirit. You are all of it. And my hope is that as you listen, you begin to see your own blueprint, the patterns that shaped you, the strengths you may not have realized you had, the places that need compassion. This is all about unwinding what you had to become to survive so that you can come back to yourself. And that is what the Healing Blueprint podcast is here to explore with you. I thank you again for being here. I'm so grateful you're joining me. That's a wrap for this episode of the Healing Blueprint. Honor what landed, release what didn't, and keep creating your own healing blueprint. Until next time, be well.